So with me today, I have Julie Barrios. Julie is a spiritual director out in San Francisco, but the context that she does that in are kind of unusual, or at least seemed unusual to me, which I'm excited about. So Julie, could you talk a little bit about who you are, what you do, and where your deep gladness in the world's deep need meets?
Oh, wow. Yeah. Well, I had the incredible gift of fumbling into my vocation when I was 22, 23 years old, which is so young.
Wow.
And I went to seminary and studied a field that I honestly had no idea what I was getting into. But at the time, spiritual formation, and this was, 17 years ago now. And so I started this master's program, but in the midst of that, through the program and so much of the work that they had us do, had so much personal self-discovery and also the discovery of the incredible gift of being able to journey with other people into becoming who God truly created them to be. And so that was probably some of the beginning of my journey into becoming a spiritual director. And so I've been practicing spiritual direction for, oh my goodness, for over 15 years. And I've also been training spiritual directors for nearly as long, about 13 years. And when I moved to San Francisco about 8.5 years ago, I started to work more and more with individuals that were in this very interesting subgroup of people, the startup community, and entrepreneurs and people who were trying to start new ventures and new products. And so it's a very specific kind of creativity and a very unique creative journey that happens in people's lives. And as I observed that, I thought, this is a very rigorous pilgrimage. If someone were to see it that way, that person could grow tremendously in their relationship with God if they were paying attention to what the Spirit was exposing in them, what the Spirit was inviting of them, the different calls to courage, the different kinds of calls to death. And so started working more and more with leaders and particularly people in the business community that were founding different ventures, and of course that journey draws different things out of different people, and so it's been a delight to serve in that way, but also seeing that these different organizations that were built, they have their own sort of a soul to them as well. And so as a spiritual director, I had a bit of a unique vantage point in understanding how the soul of a business or the soul of an organization can really be held through its language and its rituals and the kind of rhythms of life it has to choose to embody in order to maintain its own integrity.
Interesting. Wow, that's cool. So how do startups find you?
Oh, mostly word of mouth, honestly. Yeah, it's mostly just from being a part of a church where this is a very common thing. But of course, I have a website also, newestformation.com. But my guess is that most people, when they need what I have to offer, they don't even have the words for what it is, more often than not. And spiritual direction has grown in popularity in the church over the last probably 10 to 15 years, pretty significantly, or I would say in evangelicalism. But it's also been, as it's become more popular within the evangelical church, I think more people are interested in the craft and also its implications for other spaces as well. So yeah, I'm definitely pioneering a space that has previously not been a thing at all.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think I've ever heard of someone going into maybe businesses in general, but certainly not like Silicon Valley tech startups and doing this kind of thing. Yeah, I was really surprised by it. It doesn't, for some reason in my head, those two things like almost don't even combine. And so I think that must be a really exciting space to work in.
Yeah, and I would add, in many ways they don't. Like the way that in general business is done doesn't really allow for much space in individuals' growth and people's lives. But I would say for followers of Jesus who are also trying to pioneer a new way in that space, there is a call to a different posture moving into it. And navigating that is very complex and difficult. And so, yeah, we hope to really serve the body through helping them navigate through some of this and noticing what the Holy Spirit really wants to expose in their own heart through that process.
Well, I think that kind of ties into... So in our email exchange, I originally had said that I wanted to talk to you about spiritual disciplines and maybe some things that might help ground people after the last crazy year. And you brought up an idea that I'm not sure I fully understand, which kind of excites me. But you talked about perhaps the greater need is for discernment practices, which it sounds like you were kind of alluding to. And maybe even the giving ourselves permission to set aside spiritual disciplines or some sort of spiritual discipline regiment. And when you wrote that, I thought of how often especially when I'm feeling lost or overwhelmed, I'll gravitate towards familiar rhythms. Even if they're not necessarily the best thing for me at the moment, I'll latch on because they feel easy and safe. And it kind of reminded me of the story of Steve Jobs wearing the same thing every single day, and someone asking him about that, and him saying like, it's one less decision to make. It's one less thing for me to think about. I think sometimes we do that with our spirituality. We gravitate back towards what's easy and familiar when maybe sometimes we need to take a step back and reflect on whether the rhythms that we're gravitating towards are even beneficial for us right now. Or if maybe there's something different that we could be doing. And all of that takes discernment. Is that sort of what you were getting at? Can you unravel that a bit?
I think, Bill, what you just named is a really helpful context in that most likely anybody who's listening to this has their repertoire of maybe 5 to 10 spiritual disciplines that they're familiar with in some way. They were exposed to them at some time in their life. And those spiritual disciplines, as they consider what their experience has been doing those things, hopefully at different seasons of their life, they'll notice, wow, this spiritual discipline really helped ground me in the character of God, or really helped me orient myself to the truth of who I am as God sees me. Or this spiritual discipline really helped me to take thoughts captive and surrender anxious thoughts. And so like all of these disciplines serve a different purpose. But remember, when we think about the whole point of a spiritual discipline is going to either to be it, to help us to further experience God as God truly is, or to further experience ourselves as we truly are. And ideally, those things start to come together. Right. And so there might be a discipline that is more introspective and self-focused, that reveals to us more clearly who we truly are, and another discipline that reveals to us more truly who God is. But one thing to notice is that, and I think maybe, Phil, this is what you could have been alluding to. that if we have a discipline, like let's just say, and this is something I think I can think of times in my life I've been guilty of, is sort of like that sort of Bible in a year mentality. Here's the regiment. This is, I just got to go through this, read the blah, 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 and it ends up being more of a ritual of almost disassociation. Like I'll do my ritual to give me like a quick sort of dopamine hit that I like did the thing I'm supposed to do, and I can give myself a gold star and check okay. But did I actually engage this in a way that was open to God revealing God's self to me, or open to God revealing more of me to me, so that I can more fully come into communion with God?
Wow.
And so I think that's a first question for discernment as anyone is thinking about their own spiritual disciplines, is how does this discipline serve the relationship? So I'm a lover of silence and solitude. I think that's it's such a gift. And I can see that there are times when I can engage silence and solitude in a way that is a grounding in the reality of God's presence, of triune love, of God's goodness, where I'm intentionally choosing to surrender to that and make a home there. And there are other times when silence and solitude is a discipline of becoming more aware of my internal rumblings and like what's happening inside. Both of those things could absolutely serve my relationship with God. But there are other times when I think, man, I can be prone to silence and solitude as a discipline, as almost like a tool of avoidance.
Yeah.
Where I'm avoiding my own heart, or scripture reading as a means of avoiding my heart, or even reading in general as a means of avoiding my heart. And I've had people where there's an individual I'm thinking who's very dear to me, but I've actually told him, your spiritual discipline is to watch TV with Jesus. And because it's almost like he was so addicted to like doing all the right steps and was getting so obsessive with this is the sin that St. Ignatius called scrupulosity. When we start being so obsessive about our discipline that we are disconnected from ourselves and from God. And then suddenly this individual started to notice all these ways that his heart was being captivated by these different storylines. And it was teeing up these conversations that he needed to have with God and these desires in his heart that otherwise they were just unavailable to him. And so notice what a light yoke that feels like. Yeah, that as we walk with God, like, can we be open to just the way we are in our relationships with other people, that the possibility that being shoulder to shoulder with another person, experiencing something together, that we find a new place of intimacy and lightness and care for one another. So I love the way that sometimes these lighter intentions can create a greater depth of connection.
So what if someone wanted to, I don't know, develop that practice of discernment to, I don't know, try to find that new light thing to take on? What's the next step for them?
I would say it really is the practice of noticing. So noticing, when are the moments throughout my day that captivates some kind of desire in my heart, or some felt sense of aliveness. And so aliveness, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to feel positive. It could be a sense of grief. It could be sadness, or it could even be anger. But noticing where that wholehearted, embodied, alive, those alive moments became crystallized in your day. And returning to that intentionally and saying, Lord, what is it that you would want me to know about that moment. Here's what was in my heart. I noticed this. So just noticing with God, noticing and then being open to relationship is really, that's the step of discernment. Noticing the opposite, noticing the moments. And so St. Ignatius calls these movements consolation and desolation.
Yeah.
So, but I just want to make sure people understand too, that consolation doesn't necessarily always feel good. It's consolation. It's feeling you felt wholehearted. So like I said, you could feel grief or you could feel anger, but there's this sense of I'm in my body and in myself. I'm living my life. I'm really alive.
Okay. Yeah.
And so consolation could come there. And as we bring that into the presence of God, we notice that God is there too. Because communion, that felt sense of communion with God, is going to happen as the truth of me encounters the truth of God. And so, so noticing and then intentionally noticing God with you there. And being curious about it with God. God, is there anything more you have for me here? But then the opposite, the desolation, is noticing when I felt numb, apathetic, despairing, hopeless, shameful, judgmental towards self or others. So notice how those feelings, they don't produce the same kind of embodied sense of life in us. I don't know if you can imagine one of those, Phil, like whenever you felt that way, noticing the difference of how it feels in your body. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So already, I hope anybody listening is noticing how the words I'm saying feel in your body. Your physical body actually, it knows how to live incarnate. And the incarnation, that spirit coming to take residence here, and the ways that we carry on this incarnate existence is always going to have an embodied substantialness to it. And if we notice that, like the desolation, it's going to feel, well, even notice how these words feel in you: despair, shame, accusation, judgment, bitterness. They are, in many ways, like the more disembodied experience of what would be truer words, which are grief, disappointment, anger. See it, like, notice how in many ways they almost have like a negative, like a desolation experience of emotion. It might feel negative, but it has like it has a counterpart in consolation that is much more substantial. And likewise with more what we would call positive emotions. So like that kind of saccharine niceness, like, or I don't know. I imagine a lot of people, I'm sure I've done this in COVID, where you're just kind of like going through the motions of trying to like be nice. And it just feels like, this doesn't feel real.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you can't feel God in it with you. And it's like, oh man, I just like wish I could relate with more authenticity and feel more connected to people. And so just noticing the different emotions that are in you, but also how pervasive can you feel them in you? Like what is the felt sense of it? and and getting curious about that with God. So those would be some of the kinds of questions that I would want people to ask themselves. These are the kinds of questions I ask myself, and the kinds of things that I've become increasingly habituated to noticing. And this is also why, I have a spiritual director. I think it's a really beneficial spiritual discipline to meet with a spiritual director regularly to help you discern that, because it's really hard to sort of self-diagnose this all the time. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have in our community talked a bit about, it's been a while, but talked a bit about prayer of examine, which it feels like a lot of what you were saying is, going through that reflective process, having a framework for going through that reflecting process and noticing those moments of consolation and desolation. I don't think I've ever thought about, I think I've been much more, what's the word I'm trying to think of? Like, it's much more of a dichotomy between consolation and desolation. Like, I've never even considered a moment of desolation being that moment where you're, feigning happiness. And like, as soon as you said that, that resonated with me, because that I die a little inside when I have to put on that face in a social setting where I'm just not there. And that is such an disembodied experience. And I feel like, I don't know, it seems like in many ways the larger culture around us almost is pushing for disembodiment, is pushing for disembodied experiences. How would you, this might be a silly question that you can't answer on a general basis, but would have to be person by person. But if someone is wanting to be more in their body, more embodied, especially after a year of being so isolated from people, what are some ways that we could start doing that?
Phil, could we just try something right now?
Sure.
And try a practice and just notice how it feels in both of us. And so why don't anybody who is watching this and can join us in this, is that we're just going to do a brief scan of our bodies. So start by planting your feet firmly on the ground and taking a few breaths. And now I want you to imagine almost like a hula hoop that is hovering over you and then moving down. And as it moves down, you are noticing the areas of your body that it hovers over. And just get a felt sense of what's there. You notice it hover over your shoulders and then down your arms, eventually down through your torso and your legs and knees and calves, and all the way down through your feet. Now just take a few breaths here and notice what's inside. Now, as you notice it, I want you to also bring to mind that the Holy Spirit has chosen to make a home here. All the places that you just noticed are where the Spirit has chosen to dwell. Everything that is known to you, everything that is unknown to you, everything that is mysterious to you, all of it right now is being tended to by the Spirit of God that has chosen to make a home right there. you could either stop here, or if someone wants to go further with this, you might ask the Holy Spirit, is there anything that you want me to be aware of? Or any invitation you have for me in light of this? Anything you noticed, Phil?
Yeah. I instantly realized how much my back and my knee hurts.
Wow.
Which is very interesting. My back has sort of been bothering me for a while, but not in like the last hour or so have I noticed it. And same with my knee. But it wasn't, that wasn't a negative experience. It was almost a relief to like feel that connected to myself. And as soon as you said like the Holy Spirit has chosen to live and make a home here. Yeah. I was just like in this body that's achy and like broken.
Yeah.
Is the divine.
Yeah.
Just in like 30 seconds of just being in my body. It's amazing.
Gosh, isn't it so, it's almost like so simple that it's almost like we prefer something more complicated, but it's really that simple.
Yeah.
I would actually say the majority. Oh gosh, I would honestly say a significant part of my practice as a spiritual director is helping people really believe that the yoke of Christ is light. That this is all simpler than we think it is. And it's hard to let it be simple. So I don't want to say that it's not hard, because it is hard. It's a different kind of hard. It's a different kind of, it is a death to self. It is hard. It is a perseverance. It is an endurance. But it's not the kind we think it is.
Interesting. Say more about that.
I think what you just noticed, Phil. So you just noticed your back pain, you noticed your knee, and you noticed a truth of God's character that would choose to dwell there. And then it seems as though it immediately gave you some sense of relief and some sense of communion. And my guess would be, and you can tell me if I'm wrong in this. I'm sorry, Phil. This has been like almost like I'm just doing sneaker spiritual direction on you.
I mean, I'm the one who should apologize. I'm getting all this from you.
But my guess would be that you thought you had to work harder.
Always.
Okay. Yeah, just notice that, notice how this feels. Because I feel that this is one of the gifts of like living in our physical bodies and our theology of the body that we're bound together through communion. Like You've taken communion, I've taken communion. We've both partaken of the same body that we are, I've never even met you in person, but we're unified across the Zoom universe. Right. And, oh my gosh, if nobody has said the Zoomiverse yet, like somebody, okay, I just said Zoomiverse. Like we're unified across the Zoomiverse and the body of Christ. And that's actually what our theology says, that like actually not even across the Zoomiverse, but across time and space, that we're connected to like all of the saints who've ever lived. And so in the moment, like we just had this pause where I was feeling like there was something beautiful that just happened. It felt like a communion. And you had it too. Okay. I'm like, I make sure I'm not speaking too much. It seemed like you did.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You're spot on.
Okay. So we can really, all we just did is we trusted. We just trusted in some very, very simple things that we actually have said we believe many times. We trusted that the Spirit is chosen to dwell in both of us. We trusted that God is good with that, that there's nothing about our being that God would choose not to do that. We trusted each other. We trusted in the Spirit that that holds this that is in you and in me, and that in Christ all things hold together. And so in all of that, we were allowed to tell the truth.
Yeah.
And in that there's this joy. There's a joy. So like, who would have thought that being present to your neck, knee, and back pain would create joy?
Yeah. Not me.
Yeah, if anything, we assume the opposite. We think, I mean, I know like the narratives I'm tempted to think are that that we need to overcome those these ailments and these human things that hinder us, so that we can focus more on the important stuff and persevere. And it's like, well, and I can see how somebody can just piece together all sorts of scriptures to build a pretty tight argument in that direction. And in the moment, though, at the same time, miss that his strength is made perfect in our weakness. My goodness, I think when you're a human being like we are, and our biggest problem is the foundational wanting to be like God, then I can't say this is ever, I don't want to universalize this, because I'm sure that there are exceptions to this, and there are exceptions to this in different seasons of our lives. But in the demographic of people that are longing to pursue God, to love God, to offer themselves and their lives for God, more often than not, I see that the growing edge of that is to come into the understanding that your limitations are a service to God.
Can you give me an example of that? I mean, that just rings true, but can you extrapolate a little?
Well, and I can say I can and I can't, because it starts to get specific. It starts to get so specific to people's lives. Yeah. So I think I can give an example from my life. Is wow, 2019 I thought was going to be one of the hardest years of my life, because I got very ill that May, the end of May, and it was kind of vague and kind of mysterious, and they figured out what it was. My life was never in danger, but I did have to completely shut down my business, and I was virtually bedbound for about 4 months.
Wow.
And had to, you know, go to physical therapy, had to walk with a cane, it was just like, I didn't even know somebody could get so sick and not ever have their life in jeopardy. I thought, like, if you're this sick, then you're going to die. but it wasn't. I was just very, very sick, and the doctors were confident that I would get better. It was just going to take a while. And my goodness, I wouldn't wish that on anybody, and I wouldn't have chosen it for myself. And I would not trade those months for anything. There was a gift and a profound, I just had, I just experienced the generosity of God and the generosity of people in a way that I could never, to be so needy was just honestly, it was just such a gift. I was just so well taken care of. It was unbelievable. It was such a sweet, sweet experience. But I mean, that's, an extreme. And I feel like you hear that from people. My dad had cancer about, I guess it was about 20 years ago. And he's, fully recovered. And he would say it was one of the greatest gifts.
Wow.
Because of what clarified in his own heart and in the kind of life that God revealed to him was available to him on the other side of it. And so, so these are some of the big things, but I don't want to underestimate the things that are not as, seemingly catastrophic. Sure. Because I think part of my learning curve that I've continued to grow in has been, and this happened for me during COVID, was that there was, when I hit like in January, I had taken some time off for the holidays, and then January was getting back to work, and I felt such a strong, like, I'm not ready. I'm just not ready. And I can't. And all these things I have on my to-do list and on my agenda to hold, I felt a really strong sense of I just can't do this. And at first I actually knew there was something wrong, because I started to feel resentful to God. It was like, what, I'm upset that you have me in this predicament. And I felt this really gentle nudge that said, who's asking you to do that? Who has these, who's asking you to, have these kinds of goals that you're trying to meet? And I was like, I guess I made that up. Yeah. And God's like, well, do you want to not do it? And I was like, yeah. And I think the first probably 3 weeks of January, I think I took a nap in the middle of the day almost every day. And by the end of those few weeks, there was something in my soul. And so that I would actually call that a spiritual discipline at that time, because absolutely. It was absolutely an intentional surrendering my agenda and realigning myself with God. And it took the form at that time of taking a nap or I live in the city in San Francisco, have my normal sort of dog walk route. It's beautiful. I love my area, but there's also, if I drive like about 10 minutes, I can get to a trail that's just gorgeous. And and like taking the time, like drive 10 minutes, get to the trail and be in the forest for, the first, 45 minutes of your day rather than in the city. Like it makes a huge difference. And so my spiritual discipline was to say yes to a good and generous God who actually wanted to give me that space rather than to say yes to my own demands.
Yeah. I think a lot of times, I mean, you've alluded to this a few times, people giving themselves permission. Is there, I don't know, maybe this is just me. I struggle with knowing what's an invitation to lay something down and what's self-indulgence, what's me actually avoiding something. You know what I'm saying?
I do. Bill, can I kind of pull on the string a bit with you?
Pull away. If you have time to pull.
Hey, I got the time blocked out. So
great.
Yeah. So one thing I would ask for you to notice is the tone in which you hear those differing messages. So can you maybe give me an example of something that you might internally hear?
Yeah, they're always accusations. Like you're just being lazy or you're just avoiding someone or.
Okay. So you hear, so if you do X, you are just being lazy and avoiding.
I mean, sometimes it doesn't always happen, but yeah.
So okay. Yeah. So sometimes you hear that. Okay. So you said it's accusation. So, I mean, that almost, yeah. So it's an accuser.
Yeah. I kind of answered my own question, didn't I?
You kind of answered your own question. Whereas, and so this St. Ignatius has so many amazing little kind of anecdotes for us to learn from. And one of them that he talks about is that the accuser sounds like water on a stone. So you imagine like a leaky faucet. It's like kind of obnoxious. It drips. It's nagging. And the Spirit of God sounds like water on a sponge. So it falls on you gently and it slowly soaks in. So as you think about maybe one of those things that you're hearing like as an invitation, do you notice it as water on a stone or on a sponge?
That's really good. I like that. That's really helpful.
Okay, so notice that also, like, water on a sponge, if you give it attention, it'll soak into you. If you direct all of your attention to the water on the stone, you're going to feel nagged. You're going to feel like there's something abrasive. You're going to feel accused. You're going to feel judged. And also you're going to feel paralysis because it guilts us into inaction. Right?
Yes, absolutely.
And so then that moment where, I'm San Francisco life, I'm moving my car from the street sweeper because that's like, you're always playing chicken with the street sweeper in San Francisco. And I feel that nudge that like, Julie, instead of moving your car from the street sweeper, why don't you just go take a drive through the Presidio? And I feel just this sort of like, this gentle inclination. Like, yeah, if I just take a few minutes to look at something really beautiful. And I have to get back to work. I can't even get out and walk around. I don't even have time for that. But I know that just 15 minutes driving through the Presidio is going to be a deposit in my spiritual bank. Then, breakfast dishes can wait.
Right. I love that. Thank you.
Well, Phil, I'm curious, what are some of those little things for you? Because, I want you to be able to name some things that are contextualized for people in your area. Might make more sense to them, since they're like, oh, what do you mean? Like, just directly the pursuit. Like, what are some things that come to mind for you?
Some of the invitations that sometimes I'm scared of.
Sure.
I mean, not scared of, but like have that moment of like, is this an invitation or is this me avoiding? That's a good question. I have two tiny children right now. So there aren't a lot of moments where I feel like I have any capacity to do something that would recharge myself. But I do feel like, especially when it's not freezing cold, like just like you said, just seeing something beautiful, like watching a sunrise or a sunset, to me, like puts me on some crazy high. I feel the same way about just like looking up at the stars at night. I love space. My people are tired of hearing about space because I love it so much. But there are moments where I feel like like you said, there's just always something to do. And there's always dishes to wash. There's always like, you could be spending this time with your daughter. But even as I'm saying that, it's never occurred to me to like just invite her into that with me. Like that would take care of the whole problem. Because then I am spending time with her, and I'm modeling for her, like, let's look at something beautiful. Just take 5 minutes and see where that leads us.
Yes. Oh, Phil, I have a fun spiritual discipline for you if you love space. Have you seen some of the images from like the Hubble Space Telescope of the nebula? Aren't they just incredible?
Yeah, it sometimes it makes me mad because it's so beautiful and it's something I know that I'll never see, like with my own eyes. It infuriates me.
Oh gosh. I would love for you to talk to God about that and see what he wants to say about that. But I remember seeing that for the first, some of those images. Oh gosh, you've probably seen The Tree of Life, the movie The Tree of Life.
It's been a long time, but yes, I have seen it.
There's a lot of those images in it. But I one day I realized that I was pouring cream into my coffee, and I was just looking at it, and it had this like nebula-like explosion in it. And I just felt this, like joy. It was like this like God joke almost. Like he was like shining a light on some attention of this. I had noticed like some of those images, and they were really captivating to me and so beautiful. And then I had this little tiny one in a cup. It was just, and now I'll stir my black coffee first so it's swirled.
Yes.
And then pour the cream in it to like watch it do its, because you'll get a nice little solar system out of it.
Yeah, that's awesome.
These, I think, I mean, if I were to call this a spiritual discipline, I would say it's the discipline of wonder. Like wonder and noticing. And, Phil, I think of you, and like you're clearly like so captivated by that, and I hear this like longing to experience. Yeah, it's beautiful. I hear you in some ways like longing to experience something that like your current human body can't do.
Right. Yeah.
And And uh, and yet I wouldn't be surprised. Like, do you drink coffee?
Sadly, I can only drink decaf now.
Oh, I actually only drink decaf too, actually.
See, there
But
you go.
yeah, but you can still make your own little universe in a cup.
Yeah, totally. That's true.
And I mean, gosh, you can't give your daughter coffee, but to draw your children into the wonder,
Mm,
that could be a really delightful experience for all
yeah,
of you.
that gives me. There's some legs to that. That gives me something to think about for a while, I think.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, what I've said, I think you've probably heard me say the word notice, goodness, a dozen times. And the only thing that can get away of us noticing is simply like moving too fast. And so, connected to discernment, connected to any other spiritual discipline, is if we are moving too quickly, we've pretty much nullified everything.
Wow. There's a lot to that too. I mean, yeah, I think slowing down is always something that I think all of us need, but is something that I definitely struggle with if I'm not paying attention. I just zoom from one thing to the next, and my life is something that happens to me rather than something that I experience.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And that is what an insidious evil that is.
Absolutely.
Because you were created to experience your life as a gift. And gosh, this is my favorite Proverbs. It's to the glory of God to conceal a matter, and to the glory of kings to seek it out. So you think of like God's glory is in the fact that he's like hidden all sorts of exciting discoveries. And it's to our glory that we would be the kind of people who would discover them with delight.
Like nebulas.
Like nebulas.
Do you remember what proverb that is?
I don't. Do you want me to look it up?
When you remember, will you send it to me if I don't remember to look it up? Because I want to, that really resonates.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much. I mean, we've hit our time, but thank you so much for the time, for having these conversations, for giving me some spiritual direction. Yeah, what a gift. I wasn't expecting that. And so what a beautiful invitation to just slow down and notice things. And I wouldn't have gotten that today without you. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure to be here. And there's it's a joy. It's a joy, Phil. It's a joy to get to talk to you and share some of the things that God has taught me and continues to do in me. And yeah, may we all persevere in this way of wonder and way of delight and openness to possibilities.
Can I ask you one last question? So, I mean, you kind of talked about this before, but we're talking over Zoom. and we had that experience across space and time, digitally. It feels like we've all moved in much more digital spaces this past year, and my community's in this interesting place where we're kind of pushing into that and wanting to move more into a digital space to help reach more people. You are sort of in both of those worlds, being in Silicon Valley and being a spiritual director. I'm just interested in what you think about how spiritual direction and spiritual formation can continue to happen for people in digital platforms.
Mm-hmm. That's a great question, and this could be a whole other conversation, because notice what we did too is that we were very intentional about acknowledging like our embodied self. Like that actually served us really well. Mm-hmm. So I feel a lot of concern for digital spaces that don't intentionally help people reground in their specific time, space, and location and in their bodies. And I feel hopeful that we actually do have a theology that allows us, that gives us a ground for understanding how we can be connected in space and time. But I think my biggest fear is that people, and particularly ministries, they have been so habituated toward a cognitive knowing and toward assuming what can be communicated through words. And there aren't enough people sort of skilled in being embodied and also being able to be attuned to other people's bodies across a digital space, that if there isn't that level of capacity, that you're going to lose a lot. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah, it does. Yeah.
And so I think how it's stewarded is huge.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Well, maybe that is something that we can talk about again sometime. I think there's a lot to that, and you probably have a lot more thoughts.
Totally.
Yeah. So let's do this again sometime.
All right.
But thank you so much. I really enjoyed our time together. I enjoyed getting I feel like I know you really well now, even though I don't. And that's such a gift.
Hey, come visit anytime, Phil. This is kind of exciting. I'm about to move into a large house in the Mission.
Oh, wow.
That God totally provided for me, where I'm using several of the rooms as retreat spaces for people to short-term stay. So, okay. I've already told Jared this too.
Good. Plant that seed in his mind. I'll get him to figure out the budget. Get us all out there.
Yeah. And also part of it is my heart is I want people to learn how to experience this kind of sort of contemplative way of being in an urban environment, and not think that they have to get away, but think that there's a type of away, but there's also a type of staying present to this.
Yes.
And into this, the experience that you're in. So yeah, I'm really excited. A great house in the heart of the Mission. And I'm really excited to start hosting people, but also, another thing we do, just to let you and anybody who's listening know, is that we facilitate what we've been calling kingdom conversations, which is conversations that help people have difficult dialogues across political aisles and on hot button issues. And so we facilitate those spaces as well for churches. Wow. And also for even for non-faith based spaces as well.
Gosh, that's people. Amazing. What a deep need right now.
Yeah. I think it really is. And so that's some of the work that we're doing. And so check out Neos Formation. We have spiritual formation offerings that are happening all the time. And now with Zoom, anybody can participate from anywhere. So
yeah.
And we will have a house too. So that'll be great.
I'm excited to see everything that comes with that. And we'll definitely be putting your information out wherever we post this video so that people can check that out too.
Great. Thanks so much, Bill. Well, I look forward to meeting you in person one day.
Yes, let's do it. Thanks, Julie.
Okay. All right. You too.